There it is again. The laughter. The inescapable laughter. It's now as familiar to me as the sound of my own voice. I stand upon the summit of the hill, and lightning flares in the sky above me as smoke rises from the wreckage below. Blood oozes from the ground, pooling in a circle around me. One by one my people rise slowly to their feet. They stand motionless, their eyes filled with disappointment, resentment, and rage. Not one of them says a word, and yet a question still hangs in the air between us. Why didn't I save them? The laughter swells to a deafening pitch. It echoes as though the gods themselves are mocking my failures, and I want to cover my ears, but my arms are frozen at my side. The crowd parts before my eyes, to reveal the embodiment of evil as he stalks slowly towards me, his cloak flapping in the wind. The expression on his face is both confusing and disturbing, his eagle eyes lingering on the people around us with an almost loving reverence as he comes to stand beside me. Together, we watch the hamlet as it burns. "You'll never find me," he whispers in my ear. "You couldn't stop me killing them, and now you'll never find me. Your father would be so disappointed, Evander. So very disappointed." Throwing his head back, he laughs again. A joyous, manic laughter that fills me with a hopeless despair and sends a shiver of pure terror down my spine. I jolt awake violently, and it takes a moment for the dream to slip away and allow reality to set in. Raising a hand to shield my eyes against the incandescence of the morning sun as it emerges from behind a cloud, I sit up and shake my head, attempting to rid myself of the last remnants of this latest dream, before reaching for my water skin to take a generous pull. When was the last time I slept soundly? I don't remember, and at this point I'm sick of it. For the first month or so, the dreams were terrifying. I'd awake to find myself screaming and thrashing on the ground where I lay, filled with a desperation so strong I thought I might break, might go insane. For a while I tried to go without sleep altogether, but eventually I was forced to accept that this is the way things are now. I wake, I walk, I rest, I dream. It's an endless loop that's carried me through the depths of winter, into the welcome release of a warm spring, much warmer than the ones I'm used to back home. I try to think of Huxley as little as possible, but I can't deny that I miss it. I miss the comforting familiarity of knowing what to expect, the faces I'd see and the landscapes I'd walk through. I never realised how accustomed I was to the background noise of a community as it goes about its day-to-day business. I'd give anything for one more night gathered in the communal hall for an evening of festivities. I miss Rose, a woman with the sweetest name and the foulest mouth, who taught me my first curse word when we were both adolescents. Even an act as small as cleaning my boots could make me think of Arthur. "Look after these," he'd told me, with a knowing glint in his eye as he placed them before me. "A good pair of boots can last you a lifetime." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but I've worn them every day since, and it seems that he was as good as his word. They're in as good a condition today as they were when he handed them to me. Most of all, I miss my father, with his worldly wisdom and kind words. A better man I have never known, and the world is a darker place without him in it. At this point I'd even smile and listen to Bridget as she told me one of her long rambling stories filled with idle gossip. It's been 4 months since I heard the sound of somebody else's voice. Come to think of it, it's been that long since I spoke too. The taunting whispers and mocking laughter that plague my dreams have been the only sounds I've heard other than those of the natural world. That last thought threatens to send me spiralling into a dark mood, so I rub my eyes wearily and prepare to get to my feet. But then I spot movement out of the corner of my eye. It's a sparrow, landing on the branch of a nearby tree, before plucking up an unsuspecting caterpillar. At least, somebody's having breakfast, I grumble with an envious shake of my head. My voice is weak and raspy, but it feels good to say something even if it is to a sparrow who doesn't give me so much as a chirp in reply. I briefly consider trying to catch it. My bow's right next to me and making it my breakfast might teach it a lesson in manners, but it'd barely be more than a mouthful. And besides, it's hardly to blame, is it? If a stranger interrupted me whilst I was trying to eat my breakfast, I'd probably ignore them too. For the first time in months, a chuckle forces its way out, followed by a fit of laughter that I can't contain and a few spluttering coughs. Draining the last of my water, I rise, stretch, and amble over to the river that I've been following for the last few days to check my net for fish. No luck. This is the third day in a row, and I'm not sure what the problem is. I do have some smoked venison wrapped up and stored in my pack, but I'm running low, and I prefer to save it for an emergency situation, so for now, foraging it is. Once I've eaten enough to see me through for at least a few hours, I collect my things and prepare for another day of trudging through the rugged, sprawling wilderness that stretches out as far as the eye can see in all directions. Since I left Huxley, I've been maintaining a steady course of due north, but that had begun to feel aimless until I came across the river. Now, I actually have a goal. It's a hazy line of green and brown that must be a forest in the distance, and for reasons I'm not sure I understand, that's where I'm heading. It just feels right, and if I can keep a steady pace I should arrive by the end of the day. As I walk, I wonder where in the world I am. Does this region have a name? Are there people that have made it their home? If so, I haven't seen any sign of them yet. When I was a child, my father gave me a map. It was hand-drawn, beautifully detailed, and it was clearly a point of pride. It must have only covered an area of a few hundred square miles, but that was the furthest that anyone from Huxley had ever ventured, and my father had been the furthest. At the time, that map encompassed my entire world, and I imagined its borders as a vast cliff that plunged into an endless abyss, an underworld from which nameless monsters would ascend to walk the earth and terrorise the living. When I told my father this, he just laughed and ruffled my hair. "Oh, Evander, the world is so much bigger than this, my son," he'd said, waving a hand towards the map. "One day we'll travel, and together we can begin to chart the lands beyond those current borders." We never did get around to doing that. It was only a year later that my grandfather died and my father took up his responsibilities as leader. There was never any time after that, but I never resented him for it. That was the way of our world. He wasn't just my father anymore. The collective needed him as much as I did, and so his days of long travel were finally over. It wasn't until I left Huxley behind for good that I made it to those borders. And as I stood there, with his map in my hand, I stared in wonder at the world beyond. Never before had I realised just how small my life had been. I reached my destination much sooner than expected. It's a few hours after midday, as the sun reaches its zenith, that I come across the river's mouth as it flows into a great lake, with the spring breeze rippling its surface and the forest running along its northern shore. This is very promising. Already I can see signs of life. Various tracks lead to and from the lake's edge, and I'm filled with confidence. Whether it be bird, beast, or fish, I might actually get a decent meal tonight. I set off with a renewed enthusiasm, lighter on my feet than I was before, and it only takes just over an hour to follow a set of tracks to a point on the western shore where a wild goat feasts happily on the lakeside foliage. At first I'm afraid he might smell me coming, but there's a southeasterly wind that should carry my scent away. Slowly, keeping my movements calm and deliberate, I retrieve my bow, notch an arrow, and bow my head. "May the gods give you peace, my friend," I murmur before releasing the arrow, sending it sailing through the air, feeling a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. I don't like to kill. Even taking down an animal is something that I do out of necessity. For food, for warmth, for survival. Most life is precious, and any time I need to take one, I do so with as much respect and compassion as possible. It's a clean kill. The goat doesn't suffer, and for that I'm glad. The night sky is speckled with stars, and the pale light of the waxing moon reflects off the smooth surface of the lake by the time I'm settled on its northern shore, beside a roaring fire, with a belly full of roasted goat and wild sage. This is the most relaxed I've been in months. For the first time it feels that the weight on my shoulders has lessened slightly. I can't lose sight of my goal, but what good will I be if I walk myself to death before I have a chance to find Doyle and make him pay for his crimes? I still have no idea how I'm going to make that happen, but it's a question that I've put to the back of my mind for now. The truth is, my fate is in the hands of the gods, and if I'm destined to face him, then I'll find a way, or die trying. I lie back, resting my head on my pack, ready to submit to whatever sleep may bring. But as soon as I close my eyes, I know that something isn't right. After so long alone in the wilderness, my senses have been sharpened. At this point they're almost animalistic, trained to hone in on even the slightest hint of movement. Behind me, I can hear the faintest rustling of leaves. It could be some sort of creature, lurking on the edge of the forest to investigate me. But no. The cautious movements that I can hear are too deliberate, and my gut tells me that somebody is trying to quietly ambush me. I stay where I am, but my muscles tense and I slow my breathing as I try to focus. The sounds draw steadily closer, and now I'm certain somebody's approaching. Whoever they are, they're doing their very best to remain as quiet as possible. And just a few months ago they might have taken me by surprise, but now I'm ready. Keeping it natural, as though I might just be trying to get comfortable, I roll onto my stomach so that I can press the palms of my hands into the ground beneath me. And as soon as I'm sure that they're close enough, I push up, spring to my feet, launch myself forward and slam my shoulder into them. They stagger back a few paces before losing their footing, and as they land awkwardly I close the distance between us to stand over them with my hand on the hilt of my sword. "You aren't even half as stealthy as you think you are, stranger. Now state your intentions before I see to it that you never creep up on anybody again," I growl, drawing myself up to my full height. I see a woman lying before me, her cheekbones sharpened in the shadows cast by the dancing flames of the campfire. A defiant jaw and deep-set dark eyes that blaze with fury as they glare back up at me, framed by tightly woven braided hair that cascades down past her shoulders. Not what I was expecting. "Fuck you!" she snarls as she leaps to her feet with surprising agility before taking a step back and adopting a defensive posture. I get the impression that she's about to run, but then something stops her. Fixing me with a curious, appraising gaze, she looks me up and down. "If you're a bounty hunter, you're not as inept as the rest, but you definitely don't look like one. What are you, some kind of wild man?" "You could say that," I tell her with a shrug. She's right, I do look wild. I thought the same thing when I first came to the river. As I bent to take a drink from it, I spotted my reflection and no longer recognised myself. Thin, pale, and scruffy looking. The same clothes that I've been wearing for months, now dirty and weather-beaten, with overly long tangled hair, and the most untamed beard I've ever seen in my life. "Bounty hunter?" I ask curiously, and now it's her turn to shrug. I'm an hunted woman, she tells me with more than a tinge of pride. So, you assumed I was one of the hunters and decided to turn the tables on me? Exactly. Well done. Yes, very observant of you. I'm a bounty hunter, whatever that may be, relaxing in the moonlight by the lakeside. Well, bounty hunters never miss out on a chance to neglect their duties, she says with a small smirk. Are they typically alone in the wilderness? I ask, raising my eyebrow curiously. The ones I can sneak up on in the night are, yeah. That makes me laugh, and she visibly relaxes, so I do the same. It seems that I'm not in any immediate danger. When I fill a pan with water and use it to extinguish the fire, the woman gives me a puzzled look. Seems stupid to have a beacon leading them right to us, I say with a grunt, settling down across from my pack and gesturing for her to sit across from me. I'm having a nice night, or I was before you tried to ambush me. I don't fancy a fight if I can help it. She stays standing for a minute, looking unsure what to do, but then she sits down cross-legged, still gazing at me with that curious expression on her face. For what it's worth, I am sorry about that attempted sneak attack. I'd have left you alone if I'd known you were you, but I've got a job to do, and getting caught isn't an option, so... Find them before they find you, I say with a nod. Makes sense to me. If you're feeling hungry, there's wild goat on the menu tonight. Feel free to help yourself. You're very polite for a wild man. I haven't always been wild, I tell her quietly. It's a recent development. We sit in silence for a moment while she tries to work out all the potential implications of that statement. But I don't want to talk about it, so before she can get there I cut her off with a question. So, what job do you have that requires ambushing so-called bounty hunters in the dead of night? My sister, she says with a bitter sneer, and as she glares out over the serenity of the lake, a piercing above her right eye glimmers in the moonlight, as if she's captured a star and placed it there upon her brow. There's something undeniably elegant about it, and it makes her seem like some sort of ethereal creature of the night, like the elves from the stories of old. But it occurs to me that despite her obvious beauty, there's also something else. A hard edge, an air of confidence, and a hint of dangerous unpredictability. Perhaps I've just been alone for too long. Maybe I'm just craving company and conversation, but I can't deny that I'm intrigued. Clearly, she has a story to tell, and whatever it is, I want to hear it. So I sit quietly and wait while she contemplates what to say next. Eventually she nods, as if she's made some sort of decision, takes a deep breath, and continues. My sister will be hanged if I can't get to her in time, and it's my fault. Our parents died when she was still very young, and I've raised her ever since. It's been hard. Money isn't easy to come by for a peasant girl with 2 mouths to feed, especially one who isn't willing to screw people for it. But I promised myself that I'd give her the best life I possibly could. The truth is, if you can't make an honest living, sometimes you just do what you can. And sometimes that means stealing to get by. As she speaks those last words, she fixes me with an unflinchingly defiant glare. I see a familiar fire burning in her eyes. It's a look that Rose gave me many times over the years, and I know that she's daring me to pass judgment on her actions. Raising a child is no small task, I say solemnly. It's not my place to decide what's right and wrong. Sometimes the only choice we have is to follow our hearts and do what we have to, despite the potential consequences. That doesn't seem to be the answer she was expecting, and she gives me another small nod. I live in a town called Lockbury. It's filled with wealthy, selfish people who'd never miss a single loaf of bread or a winter coat, she says with hatred dripping from every word. Those bastards would rather see us starve to death or freeze in the winter months than lift a hand to help us. It makes me sick
that they get to live comfortable lives, never knowing or caring what it's like to exist hand to mouth. I watched for years as they did nothing except earn more money off the back of hard-working people to whom they give no credit or respect. It got to the point where I had nothing left to give. But I wasn't going to see Celeste go hungry while people attended dinner parties. So I stole from them. These people have too much, and yet they aren't willing to share even their scraps with people who need them to survive. You might think I'm nothing more than a lowly thief, and maybe I am, but if it's a choice between being a law-abiding citizen and giving Celeste the life she deserves, I know what my choice is, and I'm not sorry for it.
At this point, a troubled expression crosses her face, and she fiddles with her braids anxiously.
I made a mistake. I got overconfident and careless. Somebody saw me. A warrant was issued for my arrest, but I've got friends in the town guard who got word out to me that they were coming. I panicked and ran for it, but I've pissed the wrong people off, and without me there, the blame's fallen on Celeste. Now they're looking to set an example, and a public hanging will send a message loud and clear. I'm scared. If I go back there, if I get caught, I'm in for the same fate. They'll probably just kill us both. But I've got to do something. I won't let her die for me, I can't. So I've got no choice.
I watch as she wrestles with her emotions and struggle to comprehend the story she's just told me. A public execution for nothing more than petty theft. That doesn't even come close to being justified. What kind of savage place has this woman been living in? Is this really what the world outside of Huxley is like? How long do you have to get to her? I ask.
2 days,
she replies, hanging her head sadly.
I've got no clue what to do. Even if the hunters don't find me by then, I'm going to have to sneak into a town with guards posted everywhere looking for me. I didn't mean to get her into this, and now I don't know how to get her out. It just feels like I'm fucked.
Well then, we better get planning, I say solemnly. And I mean it. I want to help. How can I not? What kind of person would I be if I didn't? When she snaps her head back up and looks at me, her expression is a mixture of confusion and hope.
Why would you help me?
She asks incredulously. Why would I not? I reply.
We don't even know each other.
Evander, I tell her with a small smile. My name is Evander.
Mine is Amin.
There you go. We know each other. Now will you let me help?
Evander, I just tried to kill you, and now you want to help me save my sister. How does that make any sense? That's not how people act.
Well, yes, that's a good point. But that was before you knew me, I say with a straight face, and she can't help but laugh.
I think you may be slightly mad,
she says, shaking her head in disbelief. Probably, I reply with a shrug, but then I lean forward, becoming serious. I mean, I know how it feels to lose the people you love. I have no home left, all my people are dead, and I'm aimlessly wandering the earth searching for the man who killed them, without the faintest idea where he is. Perhaps, if I help you, the gods will see fit to help me. And if it makes you feel better, we can pretend that that's why I'm doing it, but the truth is I just don't want any more innocent people to die. She seems to cycle through a range of emotions as she processes what I just told her. Confusion, understanding, pity, and finally acceptance.
Okay, I don't know why I trust you, but I do, and I need all the help I can get. We can stay here tonight, but we need to move before the sun rises. It's too exposed and it's such a prominent landmark, the hunters are bound to come looking eventually. I've got a place to stay in the forest. It's well hidden, and we can all up there tomorrow while we decide what to do.
Get some rest then, I tell her, and when she opens her mouth to argue, I hold up a hand to stop her. My camp, my rules. Come on, get some rest and I'll keep watch. I'll wake you in a few hours. You're gonna need your wits about you if you're guiding me through the forest tomorrow. I can tell that she still wants to argue, but eventually she shrugs, pulls a bedroll from her pack and lies down. Part of me expects her to just pretend to be asleep, but within minutes her breathing changes, and it's clearly not an act. This really has turned out to be a strange night. Sleep has become something that I endure rather than enjoy, so I have no problem staying awake. Perhaps I'll regret it in the morning, but in truth I'm actually grateful for a night free of Valdus Doyle. The hours trickle by as I sit in quiet contemplation, thinking of Amin shouldering the burden of raising Celeste by herself sends my mind to a bittersweet place that I haven't allowed it to wander in so long. To Annabelle. As delicate and graceful as a bird, she was every bit as beautiful as her mother had been. I smile to myself as I recall the way she'd laugh with giddy joy as she sat in the saddle in front of me, screaming at me to slow down when I playfully spurred Flint onwards. The intense concentration on her face when my father taught her to fish, and the pride that shone in her green eyes when she presented me with her first catch. Her inquisitive mind knew no bounds, and even at her age she was so much smarter than I was. I hate myself for thinking it, but I can only thank the gods that illness took her, before Doyle could. I lose myself in happy memories, until the moon dips towards the horizon and the world slowly comes to life. At first light, I call Amin's name softly to no response. Fantastic. I was hoping I could rouse her from a distance, but she's sleeping like a rock, so it seems I'm going to have to approach. Cautiously, half expecting her to strike like a coiled snake and take my arm off, I move over and shake her gently by the shoulder. It takes a minute or so, but eventually her eyes open and she sits up. I come dangerously close to cracking a joke about sleeping so deeply when she's a hunted woman, but luckily I manage to hold my tongue. Now isn't the time to embrace the return of the old Evander. Am I glad that I'm beginning to feel like myself again? Of course I am. But first thing in the morning may not be the best time to remind her that so-called bounty hunters are trying to stop her from sparing her sister a brutal death. Getting to her feet, she heads to the lake and splashes water on her face before straightening back up. I watch her in the dim light of the morning, and she doesn't seem any less intimidating than she did last night. Along with the piercing upon her brow, she has numerous hoops and studs in her left ear. Her braids are woven with strands of red linen, and there's a small crescent-shaped scar on her cheek. As she reaches for her pack, I see that the bare skin of her wrist has been inked with some sort of intricate design. It reminds me of Grim, the blacksmith, so named due to the fact that he hardly ever wore a smile. It would mark his skin the same way. Who is this woman? I'm fascinated, and I want to find out more about her. I have a feeling there's lots to learn, but I do need to be careful. I can't allow my desire to not be alone anymore put me on the back foot. Naive desperation could lead to misplaced trust, and although my gut tells me as long as I don't cross her I'll be fine, I can't shake the feeling that if I let her get too close she might stick a knife in my back. After all, Doyle lived amongst us for years. He was a valued member of the community, and all that time he was hiding his true nature, picking us off one by one, pulling our strings and making us dance like marionettes until he grew bored of us. It was only ever due to his own admission of guilt that we found out the truth, and now I think even that was part of his master plan. Knowing our ways and customs, he was fully aware of the consequences of his admission. Over the last few months I've come to believe that his incarceration, the summoning of the Taken, his so-called sacrifice and the destruction of Huxley was simply one big game. Nothing more than a theatrical performance for his own amusement. I will help Amin, because it's the right thing to do, and maybe one day we can become good friends. But for now I need to maintain a state of constant vigilance. We waste no time, and within 10 minutes we're ready to get going. When I start trying to conceal the signs of our camp, Amin rolls her eyes at me. "Trust me, they're not going to find us in there," she says with a jerk of her thumb towards the forest. "They're looking for one person, not two. Even if they find this place, even if they try to track us, they're going to have an hard time, and honestly, I'd quite like to see them try." It quickly becomes apparent that she's telling the truth. The canopy is thick, casting us in a perpetual gloom, and as the morning progresses the sunlight only occasionally breaks through. Without Amin nimbly picking a way through the dense undergrowth to guide me, I would have found the hike difficult at best. However, nature isn't the only obstacle to contend with. I'm grateful for my years of experience when it comes to hunting and setting traps. Without them, I might not have spotted the cunningly concealed tripwire. Anybody unfortunate enough to miss it would surely meet a swift and decisive end. "Nice Deadfall," I called to Amin. "Were you going to tell me about it, or just let me get my skull caved in?"
"No, I'd have told you about it. Eventually," she answers playfully over her shoulder. "It was a test, to see how perceptive you are. Now I know for sure you're not a bounty hunter."
I'm starting to feel sorry for these bounty hunters. I'm not sure they know what they're up against. You're a scary woman, Amin. Remind me to never piss you off. She lets out a bark of laughter, and then we lapse back into a companionable silence. After that, I amuse myself by keeping an eye out for the various traps scattered throughout the forest. There's plenty of them, and I'm sure there's more that I don't see. I really don't envy this woman's enemies, and I hope that by the grace of the gods that I stay on her good side. The hike isn't easy. If there's any main paths, Amin is keeping us far away from them, and in places it's so overgrown that it's difficult to move. By the time we come to a sheer rock wall, I'm tired, hungry, and cut to shreds by thorns and brambles. A group of hanging vines conceals the narrow mouth of a cave, and we squeeze our way through into the cavern beyond, which is easily big enough to house the two of us. It takes a minute for my eyes to adjust to the near total darkness, but it's clear that this is where she's been hiding out. It's relatively warm, and within minutes we're sat using our bedrolls for comfort as we eat some more of last night's goat. As soon as I've finished my last mouthful, I'm hit by a wave of tiredness, and I struggle to suppress a large yawn. "Rest," Amin says firmly, and when I shake my head, she rolls her eyes at me again. "My camp, my rules. Rest, Evander. I'm not gonna stab you in your sleep." Although I don't really want to, I can tell there's no point arguing, and if we've got another hike ahead of us tonight, I can't afford to be dead on my feet. So I lie down, and sleep claims me almost as soon as I close my eyes. I wake in the early afternoon, and I actually feel refreshed, despite the usual troubling dreams. Amin waits quietly whilst I rouse myself, and once I'm ready I sit across from her. "So, tell me about Lockbury. What do I need to know?"
"Well, it's an industrial town, the largest one in the region, which is a point of pride. Metal, fabrics, pottery, you name it, and there's a factory for it in Lockbury. Raw materials are brought in by barge from the smaller mining towns along the Great North Canal. Once something's been made out of them, they're shipped off up to Helborough, the capital. Everyone who lives in Lockbury either works in one of the factories or owns one of them. There's plenty of scumbags lining their pockets, while the people who actually break their bodies in the forges and the mills are given little to nothing until they can't work anymore, at which point they're actually given nothing. There's lots of people who can't even afford homes, and if they're lucky they get to live on the streets. If they're not, well, they get kicked out. It's the dirt poor and the filthy rich living almost side by side. The industrial district and the workers' houses are all in the south, but those with wealth and status live in the northern outskirts because it's closest to Helborough, so that's where the nicer properties are, but you've got to be loaded to afford one of them. There's a town common and a marketplace that more or less divides the workers' houses from the more affluent area. I guess they've got to separate the wheat from the chaff somehow. That's where they stage the executions when they want to remind people who's in charge, so that's where we're going to have to get to. Unfortunately, it's right in the middle of town. It's going to be dangerous, Evander, I'm not going to lie. There's going to be guards everywhere. Getting in isn't going to be easy, but getting out, that's going to be even harder.
We spend the next few hours throwing ideas back and forth. I get as much additional information out of her as I can. How many guards are there likely to be? Where will they be posted? Does she know any convenient ways in or out of town? One by one, plans are proposed and then shot down. Slowly, but surely, it begins to feel like a hopeless task. Just me and Amin versus the entirety of Lockbury's town guard. I remain outwardly positive, not wanting to show Amin how many doubts I have, but little by little we're left with fewer options, and eventually it seems that there's only going to be one way to get this done. It's pretty simple, really. We're going to have to somehow get in, rescue Celeste, and get back out again, without dying. I don't like it, but that's just the way it is. Once evening arrives, we grab our things and begin our second hike of the day. We lose ourselves in the easy flow of conversation as we walk. It takes me a little while to get used to the fact that she chooses her words carefully and uses them sparingly, but nonetheless I am glad of her company. Neither of us is eager to broach any of the heavier topics that weigh us down, so instead we dance around them and avoid them as best we can. We swap childhood stories and other meaningless things. I tell her about growing up in Huxley, and in return she tells me of life in Lockbury. I'm stunned time and time again by the casual, matter-of-fact way that she tells me things I find horrifying, and it makes me realise how lucky I was to grow up in a loving community where people respected one another as true equals. Nobody ever went cold or hungry, because helping a neighbour in need was second nature, and I was never beaten by somebody who saw themselves as my superior, simply for looking at them in a way they didn't like. While I was raised with a gentle hand, hidden away in our valley, enjoying a comfortably quiet existence, Amin has had to scratch and claw to survive. I wish I could rebuild my home. It seems Amin wishes she could burn hers to the ground. The more she tells me, the more I feel a growing sense of unease. Something isn't sitting right, but I can't put my finger on it. As much as I try to ignore it, I can't shake the nagging disquiet in my gut. It's gone midnight by the time we leave the forest, and another 6 hours across open plains in the light of a gibbous moon. I can see Amin growing more anxious by the second, but it's a quiet night, and we don't encounter another living soul. We circle round and approach Lockbury from the northwest in the early hours of the morning, concealing ourselves in the long grass of a small hill some distance away. My jaw drops open when I see it. I'm awestruck by the ocean of stone that scars the landscape before me. Huxley housed maybe 200 people, but Lockbury is big enough for many times that number. The morning sun, which is creeping slowly over the eastern horizon, is obscured by thick plumes of black smoke, billowing from enormous chimneys that stretch towards the sky, like the fingers of some hideous creature that seek to tear it down. Soot falls like black rain on the cobbled streets below. Buildings of brick and mortar, most of which are bigger than any I've ever seen, stretch out in disorderly rows, and towards the centre one construction looms high above the rest with a dominating grandeur. It's a clock tower with 4 faces, painted a striking blue, that I imagine can be seen throughout the entirety of Lockbury. The Great North Canal, its water seeming thick and sluggish, flows out through a large gate in the northern wall, and already a boat drifts along slowly, being drawn by a pair of horses.
"Are you okay?"
Amin asks, her voice filled with confusion and concern. My jaw moves, but I struggle to find the words to express how I feel. I feel like I'm looking at something from a different world, I say quietly. I've never seen anything like it.
"Welcome to civilization, wild man, if you can call the animals who run that place civilized," she replies with a wry laugh.
I shake my head in wonder and disbelief. Even with Amin's descriptions, this is far beyond anything I'd imagined. How, in the green earth of the gods, are we supposed to do what we came here to do? It now feels like an insurmountable task. Capture or death feel like a certainty, and hopelessness threatens to overwhelm me, but I push it down and steel myself against it. We will find a way. I refuse to turn aside now. I failed my people, but this is a small chance at some degree of redemption, and I won't fail again. Let's go, I say with a grim determination, but as I take a step forward, Amin throws out an arm to stop me. Evander, wait! When I look at her, I see that some hidden resolve is crumbling. Her shoulders sag, and she hangs her head sadly. What is it, Amin? I ask apprehensively, as the sense of unease I've been holding at bay throughout the night rises once more. I lied to you, Evander, she replies ashamedly. This isn't about Celeste. She's already dead. My stomach lurches and my jaw drops open once more. I am a gullible fool. Is there no one left in this world who I can trust? Has she simply been playing some devious game with me? Does she have some private, nefarious reason for luring me towards Lockbury? If so, why tell me now? It makes no sense. Explain, I growl furiously. Amin lifts her head to look at me, and I see that her hazel eyes, flecked with green, are filled with a hesitant sadness. The story I told you is at least halfway true, she explains with a resentful glance towards Lockbury. Celeste was my older sister, and it was she who raised me when our parents died. It was never easy for her. She had nothing, Evander, except the stubborn determination to give me a life she thought I deserved. From time to time she'd steal what we needed. Food, clothes, even money. I don't think she ever gave up on the hope that one day I'd have enough to leave Lockbury behind for good. I don't know where she thought I'd go, but I think she just needed a dream to cling to. It was 5 years ago when she was caught. A peasant girl, on the wrong side of town, leaving the house of a wealthy family. When she was arrested, the rich and powerful wanted an example made out of her, so she was given a public trial. They offered her the chance to repent, but she wasn't sorry, and she may have been a thief, but Celeste was not a liar. I was there in the crowd, and she was looking right at me when she spoke her final words. Stand up for what you believe in. Never be ruled by fear. They may think they own your body, but they can never own your soul. Rise up, people of Lockbury, and take what's yours. At this point she pauses to take a deep, steadying breath. A single tear slides down her cheek, and she wipes it away angrily. They couldn't have someone challenging their authority, so they called her a treasonous whore and sentenced her to death just to make sure that the rabble didn't get any lofty ideas, to stamp out any sign of dissent before it could gain momentum. But Celeste went out kicking and screaming. She never stopped fighting until the noose was tightened. I swore to myself on that day that I'd honour those last words and continue what she'd just started. Since then, I've caused as much trouble as possible for the bastards in charge. I've made a nuisance of myself and become public enemy number 1. I've painted messages on walls and tried my best to get people to see how bad things have gotten. I've robbed barges and supply wagons so I can sell what I've taken to people in other towns. Everything I get for it, I give back to the people who really need it, because somebody has to. Things can't keep going the way they are. Until recently I did it all anonymously, but then somebody grasped me in. Luckily a friend of mine in the town guard managed to get me out of there. But now innocent people who've done nothing wrong other than accept the help I offered are gonna die to teach people a lesson. They want all of Lockbury to know that Amin Barrett's bad news. I got them into this mess, and I can't just leave them to die. I couldn't live with myself. I'm sorry I lied, Evander, I really am. But I just needed help and I thought that that was the best way to get it. I stare at her, feeling torn. I don't know what to believe. The story she just told me sounded so convincing, and yet I felt the same way about the one she shared with me as we sat beside the lake. Perhaps that version was given weight by the shred of truth that she wove into it. I search her eyes for any hint of deceit, but all I find is sadness, regret, and guilt. My head tells me that this could still be some sort of trick, and that I would be a fool for trusting her now. My heart, on the other hand, says that she's telling the truth. I run a frustrated hand across my face. In the end, what difference does it make? Celeste or no Celeste, innocent people are still facing a public execution for the sake of sending a message, and the thought of it fills me with outrage. My mind flits back to Doyle, but that was not the same thing. That creature killed indiscriminately and without remorse. The summoning of the Taken was performed to give the souls of his victims justice so they could rest. It was the condemnation of somebody warped, devious, and amoral, not the callous murder of people who are guilty of nothing more than accepting help from the wrong person. My eyes are drawn to Lockbury, and I wonder, at this moment, how many people are struggling to survive. Amine has been reckless, and her actions have brought trouble to the doorstep of people who don't deserve it. Desperate people, who have no choice but to accept what she's offering, regardless of the consequences. At the same time, she has pure intentions. All she wants is to balance the scales, and when I look at her, I see a resolute woman who wants the best for her people. Somebody who stands up for what she believes in, who sees injustice and inequality all around her and wants to do something about it. Somebody whose sister was executed for simply trying to provide a life worth living. Who am I to pass judgment? Can I really blame her for the path that she's chosen to walk? If I'd have lived her life, would I have done anything differently? Okay, I say with a decisive nod. Let's do what needs to be done.
Wait, are you saying that I lied to you, and you still want to help?
Yes.
I don't get it. Why? Why would you help now?
Do I really need a reason? I ask, feeling vaguely annoyed.
Yes, you do, she insists.
What's changed, I mean? Yes, you lied to me, but I understand why you did it. You came across a random stranger, you needed help, and you said what you needed to say to get it. You could have let me go in there none the wiser, not realising the deceit until it was too late to back out. But you didn't. And I can't let you go in there alone with a clear conscience, the same way you couldn't let me follow you without telling me the truth. For some reason, the gods led me to you, and now we're in this together, so I won't back down now. But don't lie to me again, Emine. A second chance is all you get. A bell tolls in the distance, presumably the clock tower, and after that a thick silence hangs in the air between us. Emine stares at me, intently, as if she's trying to work out some sort of complicated puzzle. Eventually, she releases a long breath and gives me a weak smile.
You are full of surprises, wild man. The people of Lockbury will owe you big time after today. And so will I.
Yes, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just see if we survive first, I say with a shrug. We remain hidden while we discuss what to do next. We only have until noon to get to the town square, and the pressure is getting to both of us. The barges are checked on the way in and out. There are guards posted on all 4 main gates. Climbing the walls seems impossible, and even if we could find a way to do so, we'd be out in the open for anybody to see. I consider simply marching up to one of the gates and acting as though I have business to conduct in town. But I'm a ragged, unkempt stranger that nobody's ever seen before. Who's going to believe that I have any legitimate business? Although I think I might have a plan, I say hesitantly. But I'm not sure how much you're gonna like it. To my surprise, as I lay out the plan, Amin has no objections. Perhaps she just feels too grateful to argue, and that's a good thing, because I can't see any other way. By the time we're ready, there's not much time to spare. We only have 1 hour until noon, so we're going to be cutting it fine. The west gate looms before me as I stride towards it with purpose. A tall blonde-haired guard nudges the man next to him and points my way. The second man is much shorter than the first. He's round and stocky with a bald head. They're both garbed in long, green coats, with epaulets bearing the blue star of the north on their shoulders. As they take in what they're seeing, their eyes widen. "I'm here to collect me bounty," I say gruffly, as I dump Amin, bound and gagged, unceremoniously on the floor in front of them. "I brought her alive, just like you wanted." The stocky one bends to take a better look at Amin. "Bugger me. It's actually her, Greg. He's only gone and actually caught her," he says before straightening back up, rubbing his hands excitedly and giving me a once-over. "You definitely don't look like the usual bounty hunter type." "Yeah, so people says," I reply with an irritated scowl. "What do you care what I look like, pal? She's bounty, I hunted her. What more do you want? Are you gonna give me money or what?" "Are you stupid? We're just guards, not the ones with the authority to pay you," Greg says with a bemused glance towards his bald-headed colleague. "Well then, you better take me to whoever's doing the paying so I can get to drinking some of that Lockberry ale everyone keeps banging on about." "Bring her through here," the stocky one calls, as he sidles into a squat, ugly-looking guardhouse set into the wall beside the gate. Amin struggles as I scoop her back up and throw her over my shoulder, before following with Greg bringing up the rear. The grimy interior of the guardhouse is devoid of any windows to provide natural lighting, illuminated instead by nothing more than a few oil lamps, held in place by metal brackets mounted on the walls. A large wooden table stands at the centre of the room, and I throw Amin onto it roughly before turning my attention back to the guards. "Money?" I ask again as I raise an impatient eyebrow. "This one's got the patience of a wolf, doesn't he, Greg? Take him to go and get his money so he can piss off," the stocky one grumbles. As Greg nods and moves towards me, he makes the mistake of glancing back at his friend, and that's when we make our move. I lunge forward, slamming the butt of my knife into the back of his head, and he crumples in a heap at my feet. Amin breaks free of the loosely secured ropes before rolling off the table, burying her knee into the gut of the bald man and following up with a vicious elbow to the back of his neck when he doubles over in agony. They're both out for the count, so it's time to get to work. A few minutes later, we step out onto the cobbled street beyond the guardhouse and lock it behind us. The guards aren't particularly well hidden, but they're not going anywhere. We move quickly, the hems of the Greencoats fluttering behind us, Amin leading the way. By the grace of the gods, the street is pretty much empty. A man lies huddled under a pile of tattered blankets. A gaunt, malnourished face is a clear sign of his poverty, and I wish with all my heart that there was something I could do to help him, but I have nothing to give. I left my pack hidden, ready to be collected on our way out of town. Further along, a woman sweeps the cobbles to no avail. A thick layer of soot and ash coats pretty much everything, and even as she sweeps it away, more falls like blackened snow. It feels like Lockberry has a broken soul. Every street looks the same, and there's an unsettling uniformity to the architecture. Imposing utilitarian buildings, with rigid lines and no ornamentation, that exist for the sole purpose of providing workplaces and modest homes. I stop as I round a corner, struggling to comprehend the grim reality of what I'm seeing. The street before me is lined with what seems to be one long edifice on either side of the road, but in fact, they've been divided into many homes, with just a few paces between their numbered doors, each with a single window. Amin catches the horror in my expression and gives me a sad smile. "Row houses," she explains grimly. "They build them for the workers, so they don't have to live too far from the factories, minimising the space to maximise the occupants. They're barely more than sheds, and southern Lockbury is riddled with them. This place, it's..." I can't find the words to adequately explain the way I'm feeling, but Amin just nods knowingly. "Evander, if you think this place is bad, I really hope you never have to step foot in the capital. They call it the city of steel and stone. Trust me, Lockbury is nothing compared to Halborough." With that, she resumes walking, and I follow somewhat reluctantly. Perhaps it's due to the fact that this place is like a ghost town, with the few people we do see keeping their heads down as they go about their business, but the uneasy knot in my stomach is back. As we move swiftly along, the green guardsmen's coats offer us a sense of anonymity. Nobody makes eye contact, presumably out of a fearful respect that's been beaten into them over time. The closer we get to the town square, the cleaner everything becomes. More of an effort has been made to keep the grime at bay. Shop windows bear colourful advertisements. The cobbles are smoother and look polished in comparison. The houses are bigger and more decorative, and although they're still relatively drab, some of them even have enclosed gardens with small vegetable patches. The clamouring of many voices rises as we approach. Of course. This is why the streets are empty. What good is a public execution without a crowd? I wonder how many of them attend by choice, drawn like moths to a flame by the sadistic thrill of such dark entertainment. Will the families and the friends of those who are condemned really stand by and allow them to be taken in such a callous demonstration of authority? Yes, they will. Because the fear of death is a terrible beast, the hardest one to slay. And even if they do attempt to help their loved ones, surely the only thing it will achieve is to see them join their ranks. Now, more than ever, what Amin and I are about to do seems foolish, dangerous, and inachievable. But to turn back now would be akin to placing the hangman's noose around their necks ourselves. We're beyond the point of no return. Amin knows Lockbury like the back of her hand, and she navigates with skillful urgency. When we reach a point just outside of the town square, she leads me into a back alley between a tavern and a bakery, neither of which is currently open for business. Numerous wooden crates are stacked in a large pile against the wall of the bakery, and she scales them quickly before using the metal guttering to reach the roof. I try my best to clamp down on my rising nerves, because there isn't time for them. Testing my weight upon the guttering, and finding that it supports me easily, I climb up after her. We crawl along on our stomachs towards the edge of the roof, and once again I'm astounded. It seems that Lockbury is not short on surprises. The square is massive, but even so it's packed with more people than I've ever seen in one place. They're dressed in a wide variety of clothing, from practical and undemanding to flamboyant and elegant. I see some wearing simple shirts of cotton or linen, along with smocks and tunics, whilst others are garbed in expensive-looking tailored suits, fur-lined coats, or flowing gowns made from silk and satin that trail along the floor behind them. They stand facing a large wooden stage that's been erected at the northern end of the square, their expressions ranging from nervous and scared to fascinated anticipation. Further north, I see the more extravagant properties that Amin described to me. Beautiful houses, built from smooth stone with sweeping gardens, and the flag of the Northern Kingdom, with its single blue star emblazoned over a green background, flying proudly above many of them. Those closest to the square have balconies that overlook it, and these are occupied by people with the demeanour of enjoying a pleasant evening with friends. They sit at long tables, quaffing glasses of wine, talking amongst themselves, and occasionally throwing their heads back to laugh. It's almost as if they're awaiting a piece of theatre to unfold before them, and it sickens me. Now I see why Amine has chosen to live the way that she has. How can these two dichotomous worlds exist in such close proximity? Abject poverty beside ostentatious wealth. I hate it already, and I can't even imagine how Amine feels. I sincerely hope that what happens here today serves as an endless source of embarrassment for those who hold the reins of power, and that all those in the Northern Kingdom hear of their failures. The Great North Canal cuts through the middle of the square. There are shop fronts, market stalls, and an elegant fountain that sits at the centre of a decorative lawn, surrounded by a cornucopia of brightly coloured flowers. In each of the square's four corners, there stand expertly sculpted statues. One of them depicts a proud-looking man, his entire body covered in fur, locked in an embrace with his lover as she gazes wistfully up at him.
"That's Dal, king of the Wolfmen,"
Emine explains quietly.
"Legend has it that before the East became a frozen wasteland, it was inhabited by people who lived in harmony with nature. Some of them could even shift at will into a bestial form. Dal was a wise man and a skillful warrior who led a nation of wolfmen, but his heart belonged to a human girl, which was forbidden. The story says that eventually Dal gave up everything so they could be together, and they left the East in search of a place they could live in peace. Without Dal, the wolfmen lost their way. They grew more and more wild, until one day they forgot how to take their human forms."
The craftsmanship is beautiful, I reply. The crying woman in the southwest reminds me of a story from back home. Halle was a strong woman, born to a harsh land, shunned for her open and honest heart. The people in that land prized prowess in battle above everything else, and yet Halle refused to fight because life was sacred to her, and she refused to take it. Even after enduring a life of mockery and torment, Halle still wouldn't leave her home, and this angered the people who didn't think that she belonged there, so one day they came with knives and torches to kill her. The gods saw this and took pity on Halle, encasing her in stone and striking down all those who sought to bring her harm. When Halle saw what had happened, her sorrow was so great that her statue wept, and the gods were moved by her grief, so they gave all those they'd killed a second chance at life. But no matter how much they tried, they couldn't break the stone that encased Halle. The gods told the people what had happened, and from that day forth, Halle's weeping statue was a shrine to them, a symbol of forgiveness. Amine opens her mouth to say something, but at that moment the clock strikes noon, and an ominous silence falls upon the square. Two horse-drawn carriages roll slowly into view from the north. One blue, one black, with guards marching on either side. The black carriage has thick metal bars upon its windows, and as it pulls up beside the stage I can see frightened-looking people, shackled together on the inside. The blue carriage comes to a stop at the bottom of the steps that lead onto the stage itself, and a man climbs out. He's tall and straight-backed, with a haughty, sneering face that regards the gathered people with barely disguised contempt. Amine told me all about this man, Theodoric, Earl of Lockbury, as we sat in the forest cave. He rules without mercy or compassion. Robes of green, blue and silver billow around him as he strides self-importantly up the steps before turning to face the crowd, leaning on an ebony staff with a shining metal grip. "Citizens of Lockbury," he booms in a grandiose voice, "you are summoned here today to bear witness, to see that actions have consequences. Days like this fill me with the deepest sorrow, but as of late there has been a growing sense of malcontent. It seems that there are those amongst us who seek to sow discord, to undermine the prosperous utopia that we have all worked so hard to build these long years. Do not forget that I am a simple servant of the Queen Regnant herself. Everything that I do for Lockbury, I do under her benevolent guidance." Pausing for effect, Theodoric raises a hand dramatically in the air, and a large poster bearing a black and white sketch of Amin's face unfurls towards the back of the stage. I feel Amin stiffen, so I reach out a hand and rest it on her shoulder as we listen. "For the last 5 years, this woman, Amin Barrett, has been a poisonous thorn in the side of our peaceful community. With the malicious lies that she has spread, and the supplies that she has stolen and destroyed, she has caused nothing but trouble for all of us. My people, can you not see that to take action against me is in fact to take action against our benevolent queen, for whom we should all have the deepest gratitude? Without her, we would have nothing. She has given us a land to live in, to thrive in. Can you not see how lucky we are? Would you prefer to live amongst the barbarians of the far-flung west, or in the barren wilderness of the frozen east and the unsettled south? I think not. You may believe the things that this self-proclaimed protector of the weak whispers in your ears, but she is nothing more than a common criminal, a liar, a thief, and a malevolent malefactor who has caused more harm than good. By the royal mandate, this degenerate conspirator, and all those who associate with or assist her in any way, are nothing more than enemies of the crown." Something catches my eye as the Earl continues his speech. It's a small flash of light as something reflects the sun. Shielding my eyes, I see it again, but this time I know what it is. A guard peers cautiously around a corner from an alleyway between 2 shop fronts across the square, and as he does so, his epaulette catches the sun. Scanning the area, I see that things are not the way they seem. This is nothing more than a trap. There are too many guards, and not just the ones plainly visible. Now that I'm properly paying attention, I can see them lurking, trying to conceal themselves in alleys and doorways. As I watch, more and more arrive. It seems there are even some hidden amongst the crowd of so-called spectators. One of them checks his weapon as he glances around the square with a look of intense anticipation. It makes sense. It's obvious to even me that Amin operates under a single-minded determination. She was always going to show up here, and they knew it. I don't know how we thought this was going to work. We've played right into their hands. Do you think I don't know that some of you harbour ill will towards those that this traitor claims have wronged you? Some of you have even accepted stolen goods or money, but let me tell you something. The Earl roars with an angry gesture towards the black carriage. These people believed in her. But where is she in their hour of need? She made fools of all of them. She claimed to be their saviour,
and then she fled into the night and saved her own skin. Make no mistake, my people. We have spread the word far and wide that today is the day, that now is the time, that these people will die unless she surrenders and faces the consequences of her actions. So now you see the truth. She offers nothing but empty promises. She does not care for the citizens of Lockbury. Doubtlessly she is hiding somewhere, laughing at all those who believed in her poisonous lies.
They never gave me the chance to turn myself in, Amin hisses furiously. No, of course they didn't. But they're trying to goad you. They know how much you care. They know that you're here, and they want to make you angry so that you make a mistake. They want you to go down there and hand yourself to them on a silver platter. But if I turn myself in now, they can't kill the prisoners without looking like liars. I could save them, she says, anxiously chewing her lip. No, Amin. If you turn yourself in now, they'll say that you missed your deadline, that the deal is null and void, and as enemies of the crown, none of you deserve a second chance. Then what the fuck do we do? Do you trust me? I ask, and she nods her head in reply. I'm gonna go down there and cause a distraction. I should be able to buy you at least a few minutes. Whilst I'm doing that, you need to make your way as close to the prisoner's carriage as possible, and then be ready for a quick getaway. How about I go down there and cause a distraction, and you get ready for a quick getaway? You know these streets better than me, I say with a shake of my head. Every guard in that square is looking for you, but they won't be expecting me. The confusion might throw them off. Okay, she agrees finally. I can tell that she doesn't like it, and neither do I, but I can't think of a better option. The advantage of a surprise is the only card we have to play. Shedding the guardsman's green coat, I crawl back towards the guttering, but before I can lower myself, Amin calls my name softly. Thank you, she says earnestly, and be careful. You too, I reply, before descending as quickly as possible. Once I reach the alley below, I break into a sprint, head around the side of the bakery, through the next street and into the square. I make it no more than a few feet past the statue of the crying woman before a guard tries to tackle me, but I duck out of reach and continue running. The Earl stops his speech as I barrel up the cobbled stone towards the crowd. A few more guards try to intercept me, but I manage to avoid them all until I'm past the fountain and the decorative lawn. I see a flash of green heading my way and decide to slow as though I'm exhausted, allowing them to close in on me. The guard is a woman, with long chestnut hair scraped back into a ponytail and an immaculately neat uniform. Drawing her sword, she directs the point towards me. "Stop right there!" she bellows, and I comply, raising my hands in surrender. She glances at Theodoric, who gestures for her to lead me over to him. Moving behind me, she jabs me in the back. "Walk or you're dead," she snarls. "And don't try anything clever." At this point, all eyes are on me, which I'm thankful for. The square is awash with the sound of whispered voices, and the crowd parts to let us past as she marches me forwards until we reach the bottom of the steps leading onto the stage. I look up into the contemptuous eyes of this pompous earl in his peacock's garb. What a fraud he is. What kind of savage kills innocent people for the crimes of others? I say with a disdainful sneer, and he bristles with anger. "Forgive me," he answers in a mockingly honeyed tone, his words dripping with a venomous sarcasm. "What business is it of yours? I have an excellent eye for faces, and yet I do not recognize you. What wild corner of the world have you crawled out of, and why are you here?" "I am Evander Fletcher, I announce proudly. Prince of the unsettled South, as you call it. And there it is, the widening of his eyes, the dumbfounded expression that he scrambles to cover. Now I have his full attention, along with everyone else's. May the gods smile upon me today.
The unsettled South has no prince, boy,
Theodoric scoffs after finally managing to regain his composure. Leaning on his ebony staff, he throws his head back in a poor attempt at scornful laughter.
That is why it's the unsettled South. Nobody lives there. It is a desolate, unforgiving wilderness unfit for sustaining life.
If you speak the truth, then what is this? I reply as I reach my hand into the pocket of my tattered coat, thanking the gods that I can't bring myself to part with my father's map, and that I removed it from my pack just in case we can't return to where it's stored. With a great effort, I force myself to toss the map in an underarm throw. The Earl catches it, unrolls it, and once again his eyes widen. After a moment of inspection, he rolls it back up and clenches it in his balled-up fist.
This is nothing,
he says in an unconvincingly dismissive tone. How strange. I was under the impression that it was a map, but perhaps you don't have those in the savage north.
A map proves nothing,
he spits back at me as a red flush creeps up his neck.
It could be a forgery, a simple task to achieve for even the least skilled conman.
Yes, that's right. You caught me, I reply with a roll of my eyes. I travelled all this way bearing a forged map that proves the South is not unsettled, simply in case you decided to ask me about it. How naive of me to assume that my brilliant plan would hoodwink such an intelligent man. I hear the intensity of the whispered conversations happening all around us increase and decide to capitalise on the intrigue. Enough of this idle chatter. My father, King of the Southern Realm, has sent me as an emissary. I bring an important message to be delivered to Theodoric, Earl of Lockbury, but perhaps you're too busy hanging your own people to hold counsel with me.
Bring him here,
the Earl snarls at the guard who still has the point of her sword trained on me. Once again she jabs me in the back and I climb the steps to stand before Theodoric. By no means am I a short man, but the Earl still has a good few inches on me, standing around 6'3". We size each other up for a moment, like bulls preparing to lock horns, and his icy blue eyes bore into me, but I maintain my composure and don't look away.
How dare you challenge me before a public forum?
He hisses in a tone laced with simmering rage. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot a figure in green with their hood up, stood by Theodoric's carriage, fiddling with something. Nobody else pays them the slightest bit of attention, but I know that this must be Amin, so it's time to wrap this up. I would apologise for the inconvenience of my timing, but I was sent forth with the greatest haste, I reply evenly.
Then what is your message? Out with it!
Theodoric snarls as his eyes narrow to me as slits. I see a muscle twitching in his jaw. This must be very embarrassing. Unfortunately, things are about to get even worse. This is my message, I say quietly, before swinging a left hook that connects with the Earl's nose. I hear a crunch, and all hell breaks loose. Theodoric releases a howl of agony as he drops my map and raises a hand to his face to staunch the blood now pumping from his nose. Snatching the map out of the air, I stuff it quickly back into my pocket before grabbing a hold of his ebony staff to wrench it from his grasp. With a two-handed grip, I swing it in a low arc that takes out his legs. At the same time, I hear a cry from Amin as she slaps the horses which formerly pulled the blue carriage on the rear, and they bolt. It seems that she set them free, and they hurtle towards the crowd who scramble to avoid being trampled. The ponytailed guard lunges towards me. I duck beneath her blade and thrust the staff upwards to strike her on the wrist, and the sword clatters to the ground as she swears profusely. Pivoting, I dash, as fast as my legs will carry me towards the end of the stage, and leap from it to land next to Amin. The guards are already starting to regroup, and one of them darts in for an attack, but Amin levels him with an elbow to the throat. We climb quickly onto the black carriage's box seat, and Amin takes the reins. We lurch forward, gaining momentum quickly, and then we're racing across the square, but just as I begin to feel that we might make it out of here more easily than expected, a stray arrow buries itself into the neck of one of the horses. It carries on running for a few seconds before collapsing, tripping the other horse in the process, and they both go down violently. The carriage pitches dangerously, and we just about have enough time to hurl ourselves free before it tips over completely with a sickening crash. The one saving grace is that the impact causes the door to buckle, leaving just enough space for the prisoners to scrabble their way out. By the grace of the gods, it seems that nobody is too badly hurt. A few minor cuts and bruises, but nothing that won't heal relatively quickly. I turn to gauge how long we have. Not long at all. The nearest guards are no more than 30 seconds away and closing that distance rapidly. "Go!" I roar at Amin. "Get them out of here!" I can tell that she wants to argue, but I shake my head vehemently. "There's no time to argue, Amin. You know Lockbury better than I do, and you have to get them out of here or this was all for nothing. So go, and I'll keep them occupied. If we split up, it divides their attention, and that's the best chance we have." I duck behind the wreckage of the wagon as a volley of arrows threaten to skewer me. Amin hesitates for a second longer before grabbing my hand. "Don't you die," she says firmly, and then turns to run. Some of the prisoners have already fled, some raise their hands in surrender, but the rest follow Amin as she sprints away. My father always said in a battle you need to keep your head and use it. Run when you can, fight if you have to. But if you do have to, then face your enemy head on and never let them see your fear. With that in mind, I turn to face the oncoming guards, and then charge at them, brandishing my staff with a savage roar. I meet them head on with wild thrusts and jabs. A few of them are forced to duck and dive, but those who don't receive incapacitating blows to wherever I can reach. Glancing over my shoulder, I see that Amin and the others have made it to the southwest corner of the square. One by one they disappear from view, but Amin turns at the last second, pauses for a brief moment, then dashes back past the statue of the crying woman, and she too is gone. Good. I haven't the faintest idea how I'm going to get myself out of this, but knowing Amin will get the others to safety gives me some degree of relief. A number of guards, both uniformed and disguised, have bypassed me and they're giving chase to Amin, but she's put too much distance between them. By the time they round that corner, she'll be long gone, and they'll struggle to find her in the maze of Lockbury's industrial district. I pay for my distraction with blood. As I return my attention to the melee at hand, a man snaps his fist into my jaw. I stagger backwards, which is the only thing that saves me from having my arm sliced open by his blade. Even so, he gives me a nasty laceration on my bicep, and I grit my teeth to bite back the pain. I deliver a blow to the face in return. The staff's metal grip shatters his cheekbone and he releases an animalistic scream. Two more men move towards me in a pincer formation, but I swing the staff in an uncontrolled frenzy and they back up slightly. Pressing my advantage, I push forward a few paces, forcing them to retreat further, before changing my direction rapidly and diving behind the cover of a market stall. I'm painfully aware that time is running out. If I don't act quickly, they'll have me penned in, and there's no way I can fight my way out through that many people. But what am I to do next? Erod, merciful protector, if ever I've needed you, it's now, I say quietly, with a hopeful glance up at the cloudless sky. It seems that Erod is listening, and he offers me assistance in the form of chaos. The canal is about 20 feet away, with a majestic barge moored on its surface, bobbing peacefully. Across from that, on the eastern edge of the square, there's an alley between two shop fronts, and in it I see a figure standing tall and proud. I can't make out their face, but there's something reassuringly familiar about them. I watch as they raise their hand, point directly at me, and then turn to run back down the alley. At the same time, I hear a colossal boom from behind me. I feel an intense heat on my back and I'm thrown forwards. The air is filled with dust and ash. Debris cascades all around me and people begin to scream in both terror and agony. Picking myself up off the floor, I see that what was formerly a building has been utterly destroyed. It lies in flaming ruins and rubble has been thrown in every direction. Already the flames are licking eagerly at the adjacent properties. What in the green earth of the gods could have caused this? I have no idea, and there's no time to worry about that now. I need to get moving before people start to recover from whatever just happened. I sprint towards the canal, launching myself over to the barge and then off again to the far side. I'm racing across the square, and as I look back I can't see anybody giving chase yet. I bolt down the alley and find myself in an open courtyard with 4 exits. I choose the southeastern one and then charge down street after cobbled street, heading south back into the industrial district. Unfortunately, I'm unfamiliar with the area and I gain ground slowly. The locals, on the other hand, do not. As I round a corner I see guards rushing towards me and I'm forced to turn back. I can hear shouting and whistles from multiple directions. If I'm not careful, they're going to cut me off. I feel panic flaring, but try my best to stamp it out. I need to keep a level head. I head down a street lined with houses, but as I'm reaching the end I hear raised voices coming my way and I duck hurriedly into a small archway. "I'll check down here," comes a woman's voice. I peer around the archway and see her turn, heading towards me. I draw back, tense, and wait. As soon as she's close enough I lunge towards her, but she blocks my attack and slashes at me. I jump backwards and then swing the staff with all my might, bringing it down on top of her head before dashing past as she goes limp. A few minutes later I find myself at a dead end, and with mounting horror I hear whistles behind me. 3 more guards, swords drawn, block the exit. I adopt a defensive posture and then edge towards them, fully believing that this is it. I block one swinging blade and duck to avoid another before pivoting to sweep the legs of one of the assailants the same way I did with Theodoric. I jump back to avoid another attack and the blade slams into the wall behind me, giving me just enough time to strike the man hard in the jaw. That turns his lights out and he goes down like a brick. The 3rd guard lurches forwards with a hefty sword slicing through the air towards me. I raise the staff to block it, but it shatters under the force of the man's assault. The jarring impact causes the guard to stumble, and I seize the momentary advantage by drawing my own sword. Unperturbed, the ferocious guard presses forward with wild, frenzied swings. I manage to dodge or block most of them, but I'm forced to give ground and he backs me into a corner. I don't want to kill him, but his hate-filled eyes leave me with no doubt that he's not so ambivalent about my own death. I feint a thrust towards his throat, and as he raises a hand to block it I slash at his wrist instead, praying that the large gash I've opened up hasn't severed anything vital. I leave him behind, weaving past his companions and hoping for the best as I turn left. I head southwest whenever I can, occasionally hiding or changing directions when I hear voices nearby. At one point I thunder across a bridge over the canal, and I know if I get caught here it's all over, but luckily I don't see anybody. Row houses and factories fly past me, until eventually I breathe a sigh of relief as I spot the perimeter wall in the distance. I feel a surge of hope. The wall is still a few minutes away, but barring any major altercations, if I can find a gate I might actually make it out of here alive. Ignoring the hammering of my heart in my chest, and the burning in my legs and lungs, I push myself onwards, knowing I just need to hold on a little bit longer. Emerging from an alley I find myself in another courtyard. This one sits in the corner between the south and west walls. I'm deliberating which exit to take when a figure in green steps out from my left. My hand flies to the hilt of my sword, but before I can draw it, the man raises his hands and puts a finger to his lips. "I don't see him," he roars. "Well then keep looking. He's got to be somewhere, for fuck's sake. If we don't catch him, Theodoric's going to have our guts for garters," somebody yells in frustrated reply. "Listen, we gotta move quickly. I'm a friend of Amin's. Keep quiet, follow me, and I'll get you out of here," the man says quietly. I don't like this. I don't trust him, and I don't particularly want to follow him, but what choice do I have? He had the chance to attack me or turn me in, but he didn't take it. And if he really is a friend of Amin's, then I might just be in luck. We head swiftly and quietly back in the direction he came from, and then he leads me through a door into one of the factory buildings. Inside, a large corridor, lit by oil lamps, stretches out before me. Halfway along it, a flight of stairs leads upwards, and we climb them until we reach the 4th floor, where Amin's friend hurries into a large room with a window at the far end. "This factory's built into the west wall," he says, tapping the stone beside the window. "I'm going to open this, and you're going to climb out. Once you get your feet on solid ground, run, like death's at your heels, because believe me, if anybody sees you, it will be." Retrieving a length of rope from a nearby table, he anchors it to a metal bracket on the wall. "That's not going to reach," I say, eyeing the rope dubiously. "Get ready for a drop then, because the gate's closed and I've got no idea how else to get you out of here. If I get caught helping you, I'll swing for it, so how about some gratitude? Now get going," he snaps, before wrenching the window open and throwing the rope out. I don't hesitate to oblige. I was right. The rope reaches about halfway, which still leaves a very intimidating drop to the grass below. I'm not gonna like this. Lowering myself as much as I can, I push off the wall and let go of the rope. I hit the ground hard, and it sends a spasm of pain up my right leg, but I grit my teeth and force it to bear my weight. I start running, and it hurts like hell, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins helps me on my way. A minute later I look back to see if anybody's following, but it seems that I've gone unnoticed, at least for now. 10 minutes later, I approach the thicket of trees that Amin and I agreed to use as a meeting place. So far, I haven't encountered any pursuers, but by the gods I would love to get away from Lockbury as quickly as possible. As I draw closer, I can hear slightly raised voices.
"If you go back in there, you're dead, just like he probably is," a woman half shouts. "Don't say that," I hear Amin reply angrily. "If there's a chance I can get him out of there, I have to take it. This wasn't any of his business. He just helped because he's a good man. We got you out of there and now you just want me to leave him for dead." "You're a stupid woman, Amin," the woman snarls back. "You got us into that mess in the first place with your hero complex. You got us out of there and now none of us can go back. Theodoric was right. You're nothing but trouble. You do what you like, Teresa. Save your own skin. I'm going back."
"No need for that," I say as I step out into the clearing where the argument is taking place. Amin spins around to face me with a relieved expression, and then grimaces.
"You look like shit,"
she says with a concerned half-smile. "Nice to see you too," I reply, and I see the woman Amin was arguing with, Teresa, roll her eyes in exasperation.
"Great, your boyfriend's here. Now what?"
"You okay?" Amin asks, ignoring Teresa and eyeing my bleeding arm. "It's nothing serious," I tell her reassuringly. "Let's get out of here, and then we can patch it up. I'm not going to die of blood loss anytime soon." Amin nods, but then her expression tightens as we hear the sound of approaching hooves. We both draw our weapons, but as the horse and its rider appear I see that it's just the man from the courtyard. Dismounting quickly, he hurries over to Amin. "You two need to leave. Now," he insists. "I told you that vigilante bullshit wasn't going to end well, Amin. Now look what a mess you've made. I went to check the west gate after I saw your mate running away,
and I found it unguarded, which I assumed was your doing. Luckily, I managed to get out without being spotted, but I need to get back right quick. Take that horse and bugger off. You're a pain in the arse, but I don't want to see you dead. What about them? She asks, looking round at the handful of former prisoners, but the man just shakes his head before pulling on his beard slightly in frustration. Leave it to me. I'll make sure they're safe, but it's not your problem anymore. You got 'em out. Job done. It's up to you now, James. After today I'm done. I can't go back there. But you've got to make them see that I know. Please, just get out of here so I can sort these lot out and get back before anyone gets suspicious. I've already done too much today. I set off a barrel of black powder to get your mate out of the square. Leave before it's too late. Black powder? So, that's what caused the calamity in the square. Whatever black powder is. Amin's eyes widen, and then she nods, moves over to the horse and climbs quickly into the saddle. I run over to scoop up my pack before doing the same, and as soon as I'm settled in the saddle behind her, she turns her gaze to James. Take care, she says, before spurring the horse forwards. The thicket flashes past and then we're out onto the plains beyond. I glance back, but still don't see anybody following us. Lockbury fades into the distance, and I sincerely hope that I never, ever see it again. We ride until nightfall, stopping only briefly to clean and bandage my arm, so I'm exhausted by the time we reach the border of the forest where we first met. Amin removes the horse's saddle to set it free. It won't make it through the thick undergrowth as we hike back to the cave. I quickly decide that hiking in the dark is my least favourite thing to do, right behind saving doomed prisoners from a hostile town crawling with guards. I'm so tired and out of it that a few times I almost stumble into one of Amin's traps, and eventually she takes my arm to guide me along. Just as it's starting to feel like we'll never reach the damn cave, Amin slows, stops, and pulls aside the vines that conceal its entrance. Once I'm inside, I slump onto my bedroll with a groan. My jaw throbs, my leg aches, and my arm feels tender and swollen. Removing my shirt, I go to change the dressing, but Amin moves over to me quickly. Here, let me do it, she says, before gently dabbing at the wound. I feel goosebumps rise on my arm as her soft hand lingers on my skin. Our eyes meet, and there's a moment of tension between us that lasts until Amin bursts out laughing. What's so funny? I ask, feeling confused. It's just, you punched him right in the face, she says between deep breaths. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that. All I can do for a moment is stare at her. But then I laugh too. Yeah, it seems that I'm an enemy of the crown now. 2 days ago I didn't even know that it existed. After that we laugh until our cheeks hurt and we struggle to breathe. You'd never think that we were two people who barely escaped with their lives today. I don't know how we survived, but we did. And right now it feels good to be alive.